Picked capture loading. Xenos detected. Designation Ork Knob. Exterminate in the Emperor's name.
Hello YouTube, welcome to the first episode of Splat Hobbies. I'm Jimmy, your host. The 1980s was, without a doubt, the best decade ever. It had the best music, the best films, the best fashion. Maybe not the fashion, but was it the best decade for miniatures? The RTB2 Space Ork Raiders box was released in September 1987, and as you can see was chock full of characterful minis that bear a striking resemblance to half the kids I went to school with. They're very much of their time, but is it the sculpt or the paint job's fault? Today we're going to focus on this guy, Knob with bolter and knife, and see if we can give him a 2024 glow up. The 80s. Do you remember the 80s? A lot of things from the 80s seem to be coming back. Star Wars, the ever-present threat of nuclear annihilation, and worst of all, mullets. OLDHAMMER nostalgia is quite a thing these days. So I went on eBay, eternal nemesis of my wallet, and bought this guy. Someone's already had a go at painting him, it seems. Well, that won't do. It's time to give him a bath in this stuff. I see a lot of people talking about Simple Green and Biostrip, but this is cheaper than both and works just fine. I pour some in my ultrasonic cleaner, toss my ork in, and set it going before running out of the room because this thing makes an unholy noise. I use an old toothbrush and scrub away any excess paint in hard to reach areas. You needn't worry about how dirty the sink's getting. It's not my sink. First things first, let's glue some sand to his base. I use superglue as I am only on this earth for so many years, and spending several of them waiting for PVA to dry seems wasteful. If, like me, you're too impatient for even superglue to dry, you can use this stuff. Activator. A couple of squirts later and that sand is gonna set hard. I braved direct sunlight to give this guy a quick blast of GW's Chaos Black spray. Now there's this amazing website called the Heavy Archive, and it's basically recipes used by Games Workshop's heavy metal team to paint the models you see on the box art, except there's a problem. I don't have a lot of these paints. Don't get me wrong, I ain't short on paint, I've got paints for days, but I lack a lot of these paints. So, I'm going to paint them with the closest Reaper alternatives. I started off with base coating his skin with a mix of Palomino Gold and Pale Green. I ended up having to give him 2 coats to cover the Chaos Black spray, but that was kind of expected. I gave all the skin a wash with Citadel's Bealtan Green, and then when it was dry, I went back in and shaded only the deepest recesses with Coelia green shade. A quick aside, these old models contain lead, so it's best to wash your hands after touching them, unless you want to set yourself up for the sort of cognitive decline that would qualify you to be the US President. I layered the skin with the original colour again, and then highlighted it with pale olive. It looks like someone gave this guy a 32mm base as well, but I'll allow it, as that is what the current models come with. I can already see that modern painted orcs have a far less emerald hue to their skin. Highlighting with Caucasian flesh implies a more realistic biology. After all, orcs have red blood just like you humans do. I mix up a recessed shade of violet red and brionne blue, diluted with Citadel's magic sauce that can turn any paint into a glaze, Lamian Medium. This is applied around the eyes, lips and ears. The skin is then re-highlighted with Azirian sand. The metal is based with a mix of cold iron and old bronze. After it's dry, Citadel's Wildwood contrast paint is mixed with Lamian medium and washed all over the metal to give it a greasy, oily look. The metal bits were then edged with cold iron and then blade steel. And now we run into a problem. Obviously the sculptors of the time were limited by the technology available to them, and the detail in the models can be a little bit fuzzy. Basically from this point on I don't know what any of this stuff on him is. Like, what's the stock of his gun made of? What is he wearing? I've decided that his armour is leather, but it could be metal or anything really. I started it off with a base of dark shadow. The leather is then given a diluted black wash to give it definition. It's then highlighted with chestnut brown. And then with intense brown. Wow, have you ever seen a more intense brown in your life? And finally with uniform brown. I decided that this orc was going to be a goth. That's goth with two F's, the orc clan, not goth with a TH. That's the narrator. Which meant his clothes had to be black, and boy can I tell you, I hate highlighting black. I started with a highlight on the raised surfaces with mountain stone, and then I followed this up with a sharper highlight of stone grey. And this is why I hate it. The model already looked too grey. It didn't look realistic enough for my liking. Yes, my sentient mushroom with a gun was not realistic enough. I knocked back the grey with 2 diluted coats of black wash, and it was back to looking good again. The teeth and claws were painted in standard bone colours. I decided he needed a spot of colour, so I painted the lenses of his goggles red. I started with violet red, highlighting up through brighter reds until I got to orange. The effect was finished with a small dot of white in the opposite corner. I coated the top of the base in chestnut brown and waited for it to fully dry. After this, I dry brushed faded khaki over the base. If you're new to this, dry brushing is where you put some paint on your brush and then wipe most of it off on a bit of tissue, or in this case, this old towel that has the consistency of sandpaper and was becoming painful to dry oneself with. This almost dry brush is then dragged over the area in question, and the paint settles only on the raised areas, just like this. This was then repeated with a second dry brush of yellowed bone. The edge of the base was painted in shield brown. Now, with metal models, you will want to protect them with varnish if you plan on ever touching them ever again, and not just leaving them in a cabinet forever. Metal models are notorious for chipping. I used these 3 varnishes from Winsor & Newton. I honestly cannot stress enough how much I love them. They're hard wearing, they've never frosted on me like some varnishes have, they're actually perfect. Just don't tell Winsor and Newton that. They like pretending their stuff is for real artists only. I used satin varnish on this fella as most of the surfaces were organic or metallic and therefore a slight sheen made sense. Once the varnish was dry, I stuck some army painter tufts to the base with super glue. This orc, having been left behind in 37 years of scale creep, was struggling to see over this tuft, so I gave it a trim with some scissors. And with the gardening out the way, the model is done. Let's have a closer look. Oh, there you are. I'm quite proud of this little fella. I think the modern day paint job really brings out the detail. He doesn't look quite so cartoonish as some old photographs of these models would imply that they are. I think this just goes to show that something made in the 1980s is not necessarily past its best. This model's the same age as I am. Well, thanks for tuning in to this episode of Splat Hobbies. If you like what you saw today, don't forget to give us a like and subscribe. Click those buttons down below, that makes us very happy here. I can't find the name of this orc anywhere online, like most of these old models actually had individual names. If you know what it is, please let me know in the comments below. It's doing my head in.